Hello and welcome to the Nerdiest podcast. On today's episode, I've got you guys a new in-review episode on the Nerdiest podcast. And in today's episode, we're going to be looking at one of my favorite films of the year 2025. It's 2026 at the time of recording. At the time of doing this review, it is 2026. But the film review that we are going to be talking about today is Superman 2025 by James Gunn. Very popular film, very sort of controversial in it takes on a lot of challenging topics and it reinvents a character so many people have a vision of in their mind. But yeah, we're going to be doing an in-review. If you don't know what an in-review episode is on the Nerdiest podcast, it's where I talk about a certain film or a certain show that I enjoy, and then at the end and then throughout the episode I give a review out of certain things. I give you pros, cons, flaws, and things I liked and things I didn't like, you know, the soundtrack, the VFX, the acting, storytelling, every little aspect of this film we will be doing a review over, basically. And then at the end of the episode, I will give you guys my finalized score out of 10. For this episode, we are looking at Superman 2025. Like I said, one of my favorite films. Superman. How could you not like Superman? He's an awesome character. But I think he's taken to extreme lengths in this film. And I think he's reinvented, like I said, for a modern age. And I think this film is a lot to tackle in such a short time. And it being the first sort of film in the new DCU, right? That's a lot of pressure to have on a film. But I think Superman, is the perfect character to start off the new DCU, right? So let's talk about Superman 2025. This film is bold. It starts off really, really quite strong. So for those of you who have seen Superman 2025, it starts off with obviously a pre-established world, a pre-established DC universe. These characters have been around for a while. Superman himself has been around. It's not the Superman, who has, he doesn't have a massive history in this film. He's sort of 3 years, I think, into being Superman. But it doesn't go over his origin, and it starts off with him losing. It starts off by saying, 3 minutes ago, Superman lost his first fight. And it's just an amazing cold open, in my opinion. I think, it just, opening a Superman film, opening a superhero film with the main character or main superhero or Superman losing his fight is really quite bold. And I think you have to give points to Superman 2025 for that, because it starts off really bold. Obviously it is bold itself. We have a new Superman, we have a new Lex Luthor, we have a new DCU to go along with it, right? So it has to sort of be bold, because you have to engage the audience, and you can't have the audience questioning the new DCU. It has to be bold, it has to be hype, and it has to be amazing. So that is what Superman 2025 is. The start is really bold. It starts with Superman losing. Obviously, Superman losing is a big deal. He never usually loses, but I really appreciate James Gunn, who is the director of this film, choosing to have the film start with him losing, because it shows that this film is different from every other Superman film that we've seen. We've seen Superman be all powerful. In Man of Steel, he was very much an all-powerful character. I think that gets a little bit boring, especially for Superman. He's been around for so long. He's a decades-old character. I think you need to reinvent him eventually, right? And I think this is the perfect way to do that. Soundtrack when you start the film is amazing. It's so uplifting and hype building, and it just goes so well with the character. And I think the guys who created the soundtrack for Superman 2025 did a really good job at implementing, you know, the original John Williams score, but revamping it. And was basically what they do with Superman in this film, is they get that original score, that John Williams score, and they just modernize it, and they change it, and they upgrade it, in my opinion. They evolve the character, and the soundtrack reflects that, right? So obviously the film starts, and Krypto is in this film, right? And he starts off the film with Superman in the snow, and Krypto, you know, is sort of playing around, and you know, so it's bold because he obviously loses, and then it's also bold because it starts off with a sort of gag with Krypto. But I think one thing that I will be talking about throughout this episode is the VFX is insane in this film. Not just, you know, the gorgeous coloring, which I will get into later, but also the insane Krypto CGI, how they make it look so realistic, how it's not even a real dog is so bizarre to me. The hair looks so real. The cape flows with Krypto really well. You know, it's very much a cartoony thing, having a flying dog in a cape. But the fact that they implemented it, and I'm contemplating whether this is a real real dog or not, right? They've done a really good job with the VFX, not just for Krypto, the world building, the environments, the coloring, like I said, the soundtrack, the sound effects, the transitions, the pacing, the flow. I think everything in this film is really solid. But I think the VFX is insane. It's just off the charts. And obviously we haven't had a Superman film since Man of Steel, a standalone Superman film since Man of Steel, which was like 2015, 2013. And the VFX in that were good, but you know, now it's so advanced. CGI is so advanced. You can do stuff like Krypto. You can do stuff like, cooler fight scenes and flying around, and you can do more extravagant characters like Metamorpho and Green Lantern and, you know, Mr. Terrific. We'll get into that later though. The film starts off really bold, amazing soundtrack, amazing VFX, and, they obviously go to the Fortress of Solitude, and I just think the Fortress of Solitude, especially in this iteration, is beautiful. I think the set design in general for this film is amazing. So the Fortress of Solitude is hard to do because it's something that it's fictional, right? It's not a real thing, but, then you can have fun with it. You can explore different options. You can look at the comics. You can look at other films. And I think they did a really good job of implementing. I love the door being the symbol of Superman. I think that was a cool feature. And I think the symbol, especially the symbol, is a big feature in this film. And Superman's S symbol is, dare I say, more iconic than himself, right? The character himself. And you have to have that symbol for marketing. You have to have that symbol for people to know what it is. You can't not have a Superman symbol everywhere, plastered everywhere, right? And they obviously did go for the Kingdom Come symbol for Superman 2025. I don't want to nitpick, but I don't really like the Kingdom Come symbol. A lot of people didn't. They didn't really like the suit. The suit, I'm fine with the suit in Superman 2025. I think the suit itself is decent. I think it may be slightly over-designed in the sort of intricate lines and the sort of netting mesh look of the suit. But I think the suit is fine. I think the colors are really good. But the symbol is something that I nitpick because it is the Kingdom Come symbol. When you have a character like Superman, you want the symbol because people will then know what it's all about. That symbol was so iconic, you know, the original symbol. But them being bold, like I said, I'm going to say they're bold. It's not like they're Lex Luthor bold. It's like as in BOLD, right? They're being brave, in this film. They decided to scrap the old symbol and dub it in for the Kingdom Come. And I think that goes hand in hand with, like I said, the soundtrack being modernized, its characters being modernized, the symbols being modernized. It's a staple for a new generation of characters and a new generation of DCU and a new generation of audiences who are going to be indulging in this character. Give it a few years and I think that Kingdom Come symbol will definitely be iconic as the other one, right? I mean, it's not that different. It's just a symbol. It's very nitpicky, but yeah, I think it goes hand in hand with you reinventing Superman for a modern age, right? So yeah, the film starts off really bold. Amazing soundtrack, amazing VFX. Set design is awesome. And I think in general, the film starts off quite light-hearted and it gets into some awesome stuff, as we go through the film, right? So it sets up the main plot within the first 5 minutes of this film, which I think is so cool because obviously we said how Superman gets defeated. He gets dragged back to the Fortress of Solitude by Krypto, and obviously he has his Superman robots, which are present throughout the film, but they set up the main plot, which is the mother and father Krypton message. They played that when he was being healed, and that goes hand in hand with, it sets up the character. You don't need to set up Superman. You don't need to do his origin over and over again. People know the symbol. People know the character. He's been around for so long that you can skip over the origin and get to the main plot of the film, which isn't the origin. It isn't setting up these characters. This is a pre-established DC universe, which saves so much time for more cooler plots, In this film, obviously, spoilers if you have, I don't know why you're clicking on this episode if you haven't seen this film. Go check it out. Spoilers, obviously. But Superman obviously gets a message from his father and his mother sent from Krypton with him to Earth. And it's sort of the main plot of the film, and it sort of sets up some challenging, thoughts for the Superman for Clark Kent. Some interesting challenges towards this all-powerful guy, right? More of a mental challenge rather than a physical challenge, because his father and his mother are maybe twisted from Krypton. Their views on Krypton are very different to Earth. And, he was sent, in the message, he was sent here to conquer Earth. Very much like a Viltrumite sort of way, right? Which I think is awesome. It sets it up within the first 5 minutes, literally the first 5 minutes of the film. We know the slow burner plot, which is the message, right, is going to be throughout this film. So when you cut out the origin story of Superman, when you cut out setting up Superman, it allows you to get into more world building. So for example, they cut to Superman being healed and then Daily Planet, right? That's world building. You get other characters. You get Perry White, Jimmy Olsen, Kat, what's her name? Kat something. And you get obviously Clark Kent and Lois Lane. So you can then get into more interesting stuff. And in doing that, that is the setup. You don't waste time. You can get into, like I said, the challenging topics of this film. This film goes through some very challenging and realistic topics that I think could be related to topics that we as humans go through today. But yeah, we'll get into that in a little bit, because, there's a first flight in this film. Very, very early on. Superman leaves the Fortress of Solitude, very much Superman-esque, I think that first flight is absolutely gorgeous because it is awesome. You cannot deny that first flight. If you've seen the film, you know what I'm talking about. He is like, the camera angles is on his face, and you see him flipping around these, I don't know, but it's so cool, and the soundtrack goes well with it so well. It makes me smile. It's the most awesome superhero movie at its best. It's the pinnacle of what a superhero can be, and that is what Superman stands for, right? We obviously talked about Superman in our comic character origins episode. Go check that out. I don't want to promote that too much. Obviously, this is a review. I want to get to the beefy stuff of this film, and then obviously get to the end and rate it out of 10. So stick around for that. But if you like Superman, go check out that episode. I think it's like episode 22 or 23 of the Nerdiest podcast. Go check it out, because I think it's a cool retrospective of the character so far. We do talk about Superman 2025, but Superman 2025 is the focal point of this episode. So, like I said, that first flight, it makes me smile, and it's just, it makes me smile when I see Superman smile, if that makes sense. When I see Superman, who is this superhero, doing good and doing good things and smiling, it makes me smile, because it just cements in my mind that this is a different Superman. We have been stuck. I don't want to talk about Man of Steel. Every time I bring up Superman, I have to talk about Man of Steel. I very, very much do not like Man of Steel. I think it's a massacre of this character. And I don't think Henry Cavill was allowed to smile as Superman in that film. But seeing David Cornsweet, who is the Superman in this film, smile, it made me smile, because he's allowed to. He's not presented in a way that is so not Superman. He is Superman, you know? He's allowed to breathe. He's allowed to smile as Superman, right? So like I said just now, I think this film benefits from great actors. Obviously, that's what a good film does, right? The actors are the core parts of these films. David Cornsweet as Superman is Superman. I think he is Clark Kent. Lex Luthor, who is, I'm gonna blank on his name. Holt is like, come on. Nate Holt? It might be Nate Holt. I don't think that's right, though. Oh, okay. Lex Luthor's actor is really good at what he does. He's a good actor. I can't say much else, because he is a highlight. You know, it's Superman's film, but there are a plethora of other characters in this film. You know, Metamorpho, Mr. Terrific, Green Lantern, Hawk Girl. The Supergirl is in the end. But it's a nice roster of characters, I think, that bounce off each other. And I think Lex Luthor is a highlight because he's not very much a villain. So in my opinion, Lex Luthor is the pinnacle of villains, of evil. But I don't think he's very much a villain. I think he's more evil. I think evil is the word to use. I would describe the Joker as a villain, a villainous character, very sinister and violent. I think Lex Luthor is evil because he is so reserved in himself, and he is always one step ahead, and he has an image in his mind he wants to get there. He's not a maniac, but he is sort of a maniac in the sense that he has a drive to destroy Superman's life. Like, that is literally his whole gig, is to destroy Superman. And that itself is relentlessly evil, right? We'll get into Lex Luthor as the film, as I go through some other things in this film. So as we go through the film, the writing, I notice, it sets up pre-established aspects. So obviously, Lex Luthor has been studying Superman in this film for quite a while. He's been studying his movements, and it's revealed later on that he has a clone of Superman, right? Which I think is an awesome aspect. We'll get into that later, like I said. And there's a certain sequence at the very start of this film with the Hammer of Baravia, I think it's called. Obviously, it's revealed that Ultraman is in the suit at the end. But I like the cinematography in this film is so cool because they sort of do it in a sense that it looks like a one-shot thing, and then keeping it in a one-shot thing makes it very much easy to follow and also cinematic, but also here's the story, we're showing you the story, and that's how it goes, you know. That's a challenge to do a almost like one-shot thing. The scene that I'm thinking of is when the Hammer of Baravia, I think that's how you say it, goes back to the base through the portal, and he lands, he walks through the portal, and the camera literally follows him for like a good 2 minutes or a minute, like of him just walking straight forward. And I don't know why, but I digged it because, and then the camera pans out over Metropolis, and you see LexCorp, and it's just so, or no, it's not LexCorp, is it? It's not, it's Lex, no, it might be LexCorp, I don't know, it doesn't really matter. But the building that Lex Luthor is in, and it pans out over Metropolis, and it's this massive, awesome cinematic. I think this film is very much a massive, big budget film. I think that's what you need for Superman, especially with the CGI, right? And I really dig the character of Ultraman. Ultraman is the variant, clone of Superman, who is revealed at the end, and it's very exciting for the future of the DCU with that character, I think. It just shows the capabilities of what not just the VFX can do, but storytelling. Using VFX and storytelling going hand in hand. Obviously, you wouldn't be able to do Ultraman if it was the first ever Superman film back in 1979, I want to say. That's probably wrong. But in the 70s, you wouldn't have been able to do Ultraman because of the CGI. But now you have that. You can do that. And it opens some really cool potential characters in the future of the DCU, right? And then we talked about how, obviously, so they cut from that into Clark going to the Daily Planet. He rushes through Metropolis, and there's like a crowd. He looks really muscular. One thing that I love about Clark Kent is that he looks like Superman in disguise, because then it makes you connect to that character. It makes the audience connect to the character more. It makes him stand out more for the audience. He's not meant to stand out as Clark Kent, obviously. But, I think he needs to have a presence, obviously, because he's Superman, right? He needs to be big, right? It just that scene where he walks into the Daily Planet and it's all rushed. It's a big city scene. It feels real. It feels natural. And I love that bit. And I love I wish we got more Clark Kent in this film, because I think that's a really interesting aspect of the character of Superman. But I'm sure we'll get a plethora of Clark Kent scenes in the future. We obviously got Man of Tomorrow coming up 2027, I believe. So that's exciting times, right? I think David Cornsweet is not just Superman, but also Clark Kent. He plays both really well. I think David Cornsweet is definitely a highlight, not the highlight. I think there's multiple highlights in this film, but David Cornsweet definitely shines like the sun in this film as Superman. I think he wears the suit well. He carries himself, the persona of Superman, really well. And he carries Clark Kent, the persona of Clark Kent, really well as well. I think it was just a really good casting by James Gunn and by DC. So we talked about how in this film they do decide to do some challenging subjects that relate to modern day times. So there's a current in the DC in the film, in the DC universe, there is a war between two places. I can't remember the names of the places, but it very much relates to what we are going through right now on Earth, in present time. And I think that's such a bold move. Again, they're being very brave with this film. And I commend them for it, because, you know, putting Superman in between a war in nowadays is such a strong subject. And I think they played it out really well. I think it's a cool topic to cover. So I think it was very bold for them to pick these challenging subjects. And I also think, not just because it relates to modern day. I think the choice of having we talked about Superman's message from Krypton with his parents. I think changing that to be more of a story within that for, Superman not only modernizes it, it doesn't, because, you had to sort of change Superman. I don't think you can do a faithful, if you go to his first appearance, or not his first appearance, the most common ideology of Superman, the idea, the perception of Superman, most people would think, Krypton is a nice place. They don't try to take over Earth, but I commend James Gunn for changing that, because there's more of a story and more of a challenging topic there, that can be explored throughout many films. Going into Supergirl, we will see more of Krypton, right? So that's interesting. It engages people. If you do the same story over and over and over again, with the same character over and over again, it just gets boring. And having that challenging change, I'm going to call it, of having Krypton, his parents, challenge Earth, challenges what he was brought up on. You've got to remember he was raised as a human, and Krypton is very much different from Earth. So I think them changing that was a very good idea. I think a lot of people would disagree with me because they don't see it as Superman. You don't see it as Superman's story. But I think that's the idea. You don't see it as the average Superman story. It catches you off guard, it catches Superman off guard, and it challenged not only Superman of, am I really super? But it also challenges the audience, is Superman really super too? I think that's really cool and really fun, I wonder if they will bring that back up. I surely will, because it's such a big change for the character. There is a certain bit that I really enjoyed relatively at the start with the kaiju. That's it. Kaiju. I don't know what it is, but it's like a flight. I don't know what I'm saying. Tongue twister right there, but it's the fight with the massive kaiju monster, and he's breathing fire, and David Cornsweet, Superman, is just flying through the fire, and he says, eyes up here, and then he flies up in the sky. So cool. I think the VFX obviously help with that a ton. And then obviously they introduce Justice Society, because it's a really interesting concept. I think it's pretty peak, because it's an interesting concept. It stands out because you're going to see a Superman film, but you're also going to see the first film in the DCU. So they would be foolish not to set up other characters and introduce other faces that will, maybe stand out in the future, or be present in future projects in the DCU. So the Justice Society obviously includes Mr. Terrific, Hawkgirl, and Guy Gardner, and Superman. I think Mr. Terrific was awesome. The rest are awesome too, but he stood out to me as being quite calculated, quite cold, and I think the appeal of him was that it's a character that these characters from the Justice Society, Hawkgirl, Guy Gardner, they're not your first picks to be in a big blockbuster film alongside Superman, right? But because it's the first DCU film, like I said, it gives me hope that the lesser known DC characters, I'm thinking Booster Gold, Blue Beetle, characters like that have not been on the big screen ever, you know, get the time to shine, even if it's for a cameo, even if it's for an Easter egg. I think it's really awesome. But look at Peacemaker, right? That's a whole show on a character that would never get a big blockbuster movie, right? But he might now because he has that show. People would be excited to see him. He was in this film. We'll get into that a little bit later. Yeah, I think it's cool that these characters that may not resonate with people as much as Batman, Wonder Woman, Superman are getting the recognition in the big films. I would definitely want to see more of Mr. Terrific in the future. I want to see more characters as well. Like I said, Booster Gold, I want to see him, and Blue Beetle as well. We said a while about the set design. I talked about that earlier, about the Fortress of Solitude being designed really awesome, but also Metropolis, and I think every aspect of this film was really designed. Like, the environments are really awesome. There was a scene later in the film where they go through the pocket dimension. That was awesome. I think the design of that was really awesome. But Metropolis itself was very unique because it almost has like a 60s, 70s vibe, to the buildings, to the clothes, to the hairstyles. And I think it's a good choice because when you're building a new cinematic universe, you get to pick and choose what people wear, and you can make it sci-fi, but I think making it 60s, 70s, it makes it, in the eyes of Superman, or having these sort of Mr. Terrific wearing these costumes, being very modern costumes, and then the civilians and Metropolis being designed around, you know, a retro theme, it makes not only the superheroes stand out, but it also makes the environment that they are in, especially Metropolis, stand out even more. I think that was a really cool sort of like psychological, I don't know, sort of unique set design. And the pocket dimension was awesome. We'll get into that later. So we talked about Superman's twist being like a fresh take on the original Man of Steel, and, you know, how it adds a new layer to his character. I think it's a really cool storyline that I want to see explored in future films. You know, is this character of Superman super? Is he still gonna be perceived as that? Is because did the parents of Superman taint the logo of Superman? You know, will people still see him as super and as truth, justice, and hope, right? I think it's awesome because he's questioning that as well as the audience. So he's questioning, am I Superman? Am I allowed to be Superman anymore? And we'll get into a bit later, but something happens. He talks to somebody and that clicks, and he realizes, I'm Superman, you know, I'm Superman. Nobody can affect that. And I think that's really awesome. He stands for what he believes in and what he does. I love how the twist of Superman's parents builds upon his alien side and how he perceives himself as an alien. You know, he says to Lois Lane in that interview at the start of the film, which I think is a brilliant scene. I don't know why I didn't talk about that. Is a bickering sort of scene with Superman and Lois Lane in her apartment, and she's interviewing Superman, and Clark sort of bleeds in and out of that conversation, getting angry at Lois. I keep saying her name's Lois. It's not Lois. And, you know, you see, she starts questioning him about the war, and you see how he really pushes to be good. But he mentions in that bit, I'm an alien from Krypton, and, he sees himself as an alien, but his parents alienating themselves and Krypton from Earth alienates the Man of Steel, and he perceives it differently. His mindset changes, and he obviously becomes troubled by it, right? So yeah, I think the whole Daily Planet, as we talked about, the whole aesthetic of that, I think is awesome. But I think the Daily Planet cast of characters bounce off each other. I think every character in this film plays a massive role of just bouncing, even if it's just bouncing off of Superman. I think Jimmy Olsen, Perry White, and Lois Lane, really good dynamic. Can't wait to see if there will be in future films, obviously, hopefully, right? And then we obviously get the kidnapping of Krypton. Where's the dog, you know? And then, you know, it's kind of like the climax of the film. Lex Luthor has a upper hand on Superman. He reveals his sort of identity as an alien to the world. He steals Krypton. He raids the Fortress of Solitude. And I think having that Lex Luthor having that upper hand on Superman was obviously a good plot line, but I think it makes sense. I think there's always going to be a part in the film where the bad guy wins or the bad guy succeeds at doing something. It makes for a good superhero. That is superhero films, right? Bad guy, good guy, bad guy wins, good guy wins more, you know? It's not necessarily bad though, the way they went about it. It was more of a shocking twist that he revealed his, true identity, I guess you could say. And then we obviously get the Peacemaker cameo, which furthermore expands the DC cinematic universe, which is so exciting. I've talked about on the podcast before how I love Peacemaker. Such a strong start to the DCU. If you guys don't know, he started the DCU. So Superman 2025 was the first big blockbuster movie, DCU movie. Peacemaker was the first show. Which I think is really interesting. We talked about how Superman tackles realistic themes with fictional characters and placing these fictional characters in tricky situations and reality, right? I think that's really cool, especially for Superman, who can fly and shoot lasers out of his eye and breathe cold air, right? So like we said, Lex Luthor has his upper hand on Superman. We meet Metamorpho, which I think the costume design of Metamorpho was really interesting. Superman gets imprisoned in the Pocket Universe, and we get Kryptonite. And I think that's really awesome because Kryptonite is obviously goes hand in hand with Superman. It's his only weakness, and I want to see more of it because the only weakness to Superman is this rock, right? There are some other things that put him down for sure, but Kryptonite puts him down. It really does hurt him. I think having Superman weak is a cool middle ground for this film. We're sort of halfway through right now. Tensions are high. I also really enjoyed the whole Pocket Universe. I said that before, but the monkeys on the computers, I think is a really good example of how the internet can be manipulated very easily with monkeys, right? Obviously, everybody does that. But yeah. So yeah. When Superman is imprisoned, we get some more Jimmy Olsen stuff. He's getting his own Jimmy Olsen, Superman's pal Jimmy Olsen show, I think. I think he's a really good actor and a really good charismatic, character. He's very much different from his comic counterpart. In the comics, he's very much a stereotype of being a nerd. I think you can look at this for every character in this film. Jimmy Olsen is different from his comic counterpart, but he also takes parts of that character from the comics into this film. Same with Lois Lane. Very much different, more independent, more forefront. She's not the love interest. She is her own fleshed out character, which I enjoy. I think it's really cool how James Gunn played with these characters, evolved these characters, and how they bounce off each other. Really awesome. So Lex Luthor, I think this is a really funny thing. He says sort of, I'm gonna kill that reporter you always do, interviews with. What's his name? Oh yeah, Clark Kent, right? And I just find it super funny, or not funny, but like sort of interesting that Lex doesn't have the capabilities of thinking that Superman would need a secret identity. Because in his eyes, Superman is all powerful. He sees Superman as a threat because of that. And because of that, he sees Superman as, he doesn't see the human side of Superman. He doesn't expect Clark to be, Superman. But the other way around, I think, is more present. He doesn't expect Superman to be Clark Kent because he doesn't need to be. In his eyes, obviously Superman needs to be Clark Kent, obviously, but in Lex Luthor's egotistical mind, he has a vision of this character, of Superman being very much a godlike character, and he cannot fathom a false identity as Clark Kent. It sort of belittles his mind, right? I think that's what I'm interpreting it as, sort of him just being dumbfounded that Clark Kent, So, like I said earlier, I think the Justice Gang is really cool because it not only serves as a nice break from the Superman stuff, and sets up future DCU teams and heroes, but it also, the characters bounce off of Superman and each other really well. I think, they are written to bounce and sort of play off of each other, comedy, seriousness, stuff like that. I think it's really done great in this film. We talked about how the color grading is awesome in this film, and it makes it stands out, it pops. It's almost like a comic book because it's so saturated, but it's not saturated so much that it is, red, blue, and Superman's colors. It's crisp oranges and crisp greens and crisp blues and deep dark blues, right? And deep dark reds. I found that the color grading and the sort of lighting and the contrast very much helps with the theme of Superman and superheroes. I think color is important, color theory, don't want to get into all of the technical sides, but it sets up a nice vibe for the film and it makes it very memorable. Mr. Terrific, like I said, a standout, very effortlessly funny, and I really like his design, and I think the actor did a really good job playing him. We haven't really ever seen a character like Mr. Terrific, so it's really interesting. I think he was very much a spectacular, smooth character. I think he's very clean, right? I don't know how else to describe him. But there was a very cool, or not very cool moment in this film where they sort of take Lex to the extreme and he sort of kills a hostage civilian, right? Which I noted as being extremely evil and maybe something that you wouldn't expect Lex Luthor. That's sort of maybe like a Joker thing to do. But I also found that it made perfect sense because Lex Luthor's character, his whole gimmick is to be extremely evil. He is a villain. He is the pinnacle of villains, right? He has so much envy and so much hate for Superman that he will do anything. He clearly would do anything because a big plot of this film is obviously when Superman, or Lex Luthor, opens the rift and it starts cutting open Metropolis. That is extreme levels of sort of rage bait, I guess. I don't know. I think the soundtrack, especially during that Mr. Terrific fight scene, I forgot the name of it, but the VFX and the visuals in that scene was so cool, and the sound effects were good, but the soundtrack, there was a certain song, that went really well with the scene. I wanted to talk about the soundtrack, other than the Superman soundtrack, the sort of licensed songs, I guess. The punk rocker song, only benefited from this film and boosted it made it trendy for so long. That summer of Superman. You know, I'm a punk rocker, yes I am. Wait, don't copyright me. I know that was good, but don't copyright me. But that whole song was just trending, and it only helps boost the hype and boosts moviegoers to go see that film, right? One thing that I did find a little bit repetitive, I think it's maybe one of, if not the only problem I have with this film, is the overuse of Krypto's whistle. So there's this very specific whistle that Superman does, and he does it like 5 times in this film, very loudly in your ear. I don't know if it was meant to be, you know, annoying or tedious or repetitive, but it became quite repetitive. And, you know, he would, you know, there's a certain scene near the end where Ultraman and Superman are fighting. Ultraman has Superman in a chokehold, and Superman just goes, and Krypto comes flying in and just saves the day. And I find it quite it reminds me of it's just lazy in my opinion. I think having a character swoop in last minute and save the day, or change the game for a certain character, there's no tension in that. It's sort of lazy. I think that's the only pet peeve, is how they overuse Krypto. And I think I love Krypto in this film. I think he's very cute. I think he was very, beautiful to look at, CGI wise. But, I think this Krypto scenes, they were trying to be funny, but they can be very tedious and annoying at parts, you know. He would call for the dog, and the dog would then jump up on him and start licking him, and it would be like, oh no, Krypto, stop, no. It's like, okay, we've seen this about 5 times. You know, the film started up with it. You know, we don't really need to see it another 20 times. And do you really have to whistle so loud? It is deafening. It kind of wakes me up a little bit when I'm watching the film. It's like, whoa, what the heck, you know? I don't know. Maybe I'm nitpicking at that, but I feel like it's maybe a little bit overused. And I love Krypto, and you know, it's hard to implement a flying dog into the scenes. I get that, but come on, I feel like you could do a little bit better than him just swooping in and saving the day. I will say, in that scene with Ultraman and Superman, Krypto did take out the cameras that Lex Luthor had, which I think was a very much a good use of his character. But it was that moment where he whistled for Krypto, and then he came in and saved the day. It just kind of annoyed me, you know? It's just like, okay, oh well, there we go. I think the one-liners in this film, though, remind me of the comic book dialogue that you would get in a comic book. You know, there's so many one-liners that are, you know, could be considered jokes, could be considered funny, you know? But I think they sort of remind me, I don't know, maybe just of the dialogue bubbles or whatever it is. It just reminds me, it's quick and snappy like a comic book. It should be, right? It's quirky like a comic book, should I say. It's very quirky, and it reminds me of comic books, very much so. So, there was a certain bit in the pocket dimension with the anti-proton river, and the visuals in that river scene was insane. I don't know how they pulled that off. The river is like, the water in the river is like cubic. Which in my opinion looks hard to edit and hard to visualize. But they pulled it off really well. I think the colors pop in that scene. The pocket dimension was very much a dark place, and having the river very much rainbowish stood out. I think that was a cool sequence with the black hole and how Superman saved everybody, saved Joey the baby, Metamorpho and Krypto. Cause Krypto did nothing apparently. Useless dog. Anyway, no slander. Then we cut to, like we said earlier, Lex Luthor lets off this rift in the portal the portal rips open, right? And this is high stakes for Superman as he is crossed between interrupting the war and protecting the people in the war, or protecting his own city. And I think that's a beautiful symbolism of what superheroes have to go through, what Superman, an all-powerful guy, godlike character, is conflicted, because he's conflicted between interrupting a war and protecting his own city. Is two dilemmas, and he can't be in two places at once, unfortunately. One thing that I didn't really like was the war scene maybe was brushed under the rug. Obviously, Superman goes to Metropolis and he saves a bunch of people, and he confronts Lex Luthor, and the Justice Gang go to the war, right? But I feel like the Justice Gang, I think looking at the trailer for that film and seeing that kid hold up the Superman flag, really awesome, builds hype. I want to see Superman swoop in and save him. I want to see the kid cheering his name. And I was kind of let down when Guy Gardner appeared. Like, dude, this is a Superman film. Let Superman have that moment at least, right? And I'm wondering if maybe they filmed Superman going there, saving that, and then going off to the city. They could have easily done that, you know? He flies. One thing that I noticed is in Smallville, I started watching that recently, they sort of imply that Superman has super speed, and he doesn't even fly in the show. He's just sort of really fast. In this film, he flies. He's not super fast. He probably is really fast, but, you know, we're getting off track. I think him being caught in between those two decisions is beautiful symbolism of his character. He's very much conflicted between who to save all the time, right? But like I said, people even in war believe in Superman and believe in hope that he will be there for them. And I really wish that we got that defining moment for Superman. Watching the trailers, I would have expected that, because, you know, it's Superman's film, but I guess Guy Gardner can take all the credit, I guess. But I think, Superman is defined by not the man, but the super, you know, the symbol of hope. He is the symbol of hope, right? And I think, this film really pushes that, but also pushes sort of humanizing him. Very much human agendas and human themes for this character. Fictional character, which I like. There was a nice little world building, Gotham, Easter egg in this film. Sort of during the evacuation bit of the Metropolis, they were all evacuating, and there's a sign for Gotham. Turn left for Gotham. Love it, because it just excites me, because we're going to get a DCU Batman. We're going to get this Superman teaming up with Batman in Gotham. Hopefully. That would be so cool. And I wonder what Gotham would look like, right? You know, looking at Metropolis and how it has a 60s sort of theme to it. They can really do anything. I'm hoping for a very much Tim Burton looking Gotham. I think that's my favorite Gotham. But we'll never know until we get Batman, right? Let's hope that comes pretty soon. So, it all sort of climaxes and the story comes together quite quickly when, we cut to the Daily Planet, and the Daily Planet cast. There we go. Sort of accumulates and talks together and comes up with a plan, and the scene is really well written. It sort of feels like a one-shot scene, and you have all these characters bouncing off each other really well. I think that's the energy I love in this film. This energy is so good. We need it in more projects. And then obviously the rift goes through Metropolis, and I really liked the bit with Lex Luthor's building turning into a sort of ship, floating ship, or it sort of like comes apart. It shows that Lex is always one step ahead of, he knows what he's doing. He has it. he's planned it, right? He's very much a mastermind in the sense. He's not stupid. He is a very smart person. And then we also get one of my favorite moments in this scene. But before we get into that, I wanted to talk about my favorite moment. My favorite moment in this scene, 150%, is the moment where Clark is conflicted. It's where he's on Kent's farm, and his pa, Kent, I forgot his name. Is it Arthur? No, not Arthur. I forgot his name. That's really embarrassing. Not much of a nerd, but his Pa Kent, comes and sits next to Clark, and they have a sort of heart-to-heart moment, and it is so awesome. I think it's so heartfelt, and I think it's such a human scene, because you have this old human who is very wise in his words, who has raised this boy, and now this boy is conflicted, and he is just assisting his sort of child, right? And he says, so obviously Superman is conflicted about what his parents said, but I think it coming from Pa Kent, it cements that Pa Kent is his father, right? Even if not biologically, he didn't come from Krypton, but I think him giving Superman this advice when he needed it the most cements him as his father figure 100%. I love this scene in Superman 2025 so much. The scene I'm talking about is the part where Clark returns home to the Kent farm, and he sat on the bench, and Pa Kent comes up to him, and he's conflicted. Clark Kent, Superman, is conflicted on his image and who he's meant to be on Earth, right? So a big part of this film, like we said previously, is the message that his father and his mother sent with him to Earth, and how they sort of maybe challenged the Superman ideology, or the Superman sort of the icon of Superman, and challenged that motive of making him conflicted on who he is meant to be, and if he is meant to be Superman, like a superhero. And, you know, that message is making him second guess that, and second guess himself as a superhero. Because you can be a superhero, do all the good things in the world, and be a complete, you know, Boy Scout, if you will. But if your parents or your origin, people perceive you as evil, you know. But in doing that, in this scene, and him being conflicted, and Pa Kent coming up to him and having a talk with him and talking about why he doesn't see himself, it demonstrates the exact reason why Superman is good, and how he has came out as good. It's not necessarily his parents from Krypton, right? It's Pa Kent. It's the Kent farm. It's Earth, humanizing him to be a good superhero character. And Pa Kent in this scene is just laying it out straight. He's saying he's proud of him, and that message does not define what he should be, and that he is already good. He is already a superhero, and that message doesn't mean anything to his perception of what he could be. And I love this scene, and I think it also defines the whole interpretation of this character really well. The set design is really awesome in this scene. Crypto, the dog, is playing sort of in the sun. The sunrise is coming up. I just love it because it demonstrates the film as a whole, and I think it separates different interpretations. If you were to compare this scene to maybe a Man of Steel scene, it would be drastically different, you know, down to the color palette. You know, the line delivery in this scene is so good. I love Pa Kent and his energy. And I think it's me personally, having that fatherly figure on the big screen is so, I think a lot of people reflect their fatherly figure or their missing fatherly figure into the scene in this film. I've seen that a lot online, and I think it's just such a touching scene to have the Man of Steel be so humanized and brought to sort of tears by a human, and showing that connection is such a necessary and key point of this film. That is a highlight of this film for me.
That Luann, she seems nice.
Is Lois.
Hmm?
Her name's Lois. Yeah, she's nice.
But you don't seem quite yourself.
Yeah, well, the message that my parents sent with me, I had never heard the second half before.
Well, I'd say what you wanted that message to mean says a whole lot more about you than what anyone meant for it to mean.
Oh, you don't understand. I'm not who I thought I was. They sent me here to hurt people.
Parents aren't for telling their children who they're supposed to be. We are here to give y'all tools, help you make fools of yourselves all on your own. Your choices, Clark. Your actions. That's what makes you who you are. I'll tell you something, son. I couldn't be more proud of you.
He says your choices, your actions, that is what makes you who you are, right? And I think that's such a cool sentence, because what Superman does is good. And that's what makes him, he makes him good. He makes him the good guy, right? Your actions and your choices, he chooses to ignore. His biological parents, his Krypton, you know. And I think that's awesome. 100%. I love how they humanize Clark. The end of this film makes me tear up every time. It's so good. We'll get into the ending in a minute. But that was my favorite scene in the whole film, is the Pa Kent and Clark Kent talk, the heart to heart. It just gut wrenches me. It is so good and beautifully written. But yeah. And then we get the scene, obviously, where Superman goes to Metropolis with the rift, ripping down all these buildings, and the girl gets sort of trapped under the building, right? And he lifts up the building, and then he sort of aura farms as the musical cue plays, with his blue suit silhouette and his red cape sort of comes out of the dust of the building. And it just is so cinematically awesome. The music gets you hyped. You know, I can't put it into words how it makes me feel as somebody who has grown up with this character, seeing this character thrive in such an awesome environment and film. It's awesome. I think the aura farming part was so cool. And then obviously Lex Luthor, they have a sort of fight with Ultraman and the Engineer. I think the Engineer was awesome. Don't want to get into that though, because I want to focus on the sort of fight. I'm using a lot of tongue twisters this episode, but they sort of take Superman. The Engineer gets all her like technical things around his mouth and in his lungs, and they fly up into the air, and it's really cool. The CGI, you can see Earth, you can see Metropolis, you can see the clouds, and then they rocket down into Metropolis, and then we get the Ultraman reveal, which I think is such a highlight for this film. such a fun concept, I think, having Superman fight himself. Having, any superhero fight themselves, Batman, Wonder Woman, Spider-Man fighting themselves, that's cool, but Superman fighting himself is really cool because he's done that throughout this film. He's fighted his alienated persona and his perception of himself. He's been fighting his Kryptonian heritage, and he's been fighting himself. It's sort of like a very symbolism, because you're fighting Ultraman throughout the film, but Ultraman is you, and you're fighting yourself throughout the film. And in the sense of that, you're also fighting yourself. You're also fighting your other things, right? Like Krypton and other things. I think it's really cool. I may be looking into it too much, but I think it's really cool, having Superman fight himself, even if it's not, a fist fight. He's fighting with his conflicted thoughts throughout the film. And it is an even fight between Ultraman and Superman, and it goes on for quite a while, and I really love it. I love the whole Ultraman thing. I would have liked to have seen Superman maybe try to talk to Ultraman, and maybe Ultraman, because I think Ultraman not talking maybe ruined the character a little bit. I think he was very much rushed over in the end. I would have liked to have seen maybe Superman talk to Ultraman and Ultraman talk back, and maybe Ultraman step away from Lex Luthor or something like that. I know he's the bad guy, but I would have liked to have seen a little bit more from Ultraman. But it was really cool. Guy Gardner is hilarious, and I hope to see him in DCU more. He's going to be hopefully in the Green Lantern show. I would love to see that. Interconnecting characters is so good when you're creating a new universe. I think that's why they introduced these characters anyway, because you need to have a universe. It can't just be one character in a film. You're making a universe. Right? I think that's where the Snyderverse, I don't want to talk about Snyder, I don't want to talk about that, but the Snyderverse maybe lacked that. Man of Steel didn't really introduce any characters other than people in Superman's rogue. Lois Lane, Zargo, right? Whatever his name is. Yeah. So, I think, Lex Luthor's monologue, he has some awesome monologues. So does Superman near the end. But he has some really awesome ones. I think my favorite Lex Luthor monologue is 1A, 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 right? It is awesome. He just goes ham. The actor is actually insane. Like, insane. I think it's really cool. And I think the flying in this film, I think I noticed, is the best we ever had. And I think that is expected, right? Because it's such a modern film with CGI. Such a big part of this film. CGI is very much present in many films nowadays, but I think it benefited this film very much, being Superman flying around. The VFX are off the charts. And I hope we see Ultraman in the DCU future. There's so many things you could do with a duplicate of Superman. You can have, him come back as an evil version of Superman. I don't think he's dead. He was sent into the black hole. I think he's in the vastness of space, and we'll see him in the future, hopefully, right? That'd be such a good callback to the first film. Yeah. Okay, let's get into the ending of this film. I think the ending is really strong because it accumulates, it climaxes into Lex Luthor and Superman facing off. And Superman has this really heart-wrenching, iconic monologue that cements this film as a new take on this character. This character is decades old, right? And this film and this monologue cements that this film is different from any other interpretation, because it's more modern, it's more human, it's more Superman than any other interpretation. This it pulls from every interpretation of Superman and puts it into this film. And it humanizes and grounds this character to have feelings, to have emotions. And I think the monologue David Cornsweet, man, you are good. And Lex Luthor, stupid alien, he has that monologue. It's sort of like a one-on-one monologue between Lex and Superman. And then obviously Lex, is revealed to be bad, and I think this is a very key point going into Man of Tomorrow. I think they're going to be tackling Lex and Superman's dynamic, being bad and good. Lex Luthor being revealed as bad, I think makes Lex Luthor's blood boil, as he depicts his depiction of himself is completely overridden and overshadowed by the hero of Superman, and Superman being a hero crushes him. He doesn't like Superman. I think that's very evident. But when he is outed as a bad guy, he looks at Superman as the guy who made him. He has hatred for Superman. He goes and do bad things. He is bad, and I think Lex is a very complex and deep character. I think this film maybe made me realize how deep of a character this character can go. And I think at the end of the film, it all accumulates with Lex Luthor, the bad guy, being put in prison. Very classic, upbeat ending, which feels like a classic Superman film or a Superman comic even. The bad guy gets put away and Superman is victorious. And I love that so much. And I can't wait for the future of this character and the future of the DCU. So the film ends, Superman 2025 ends with a sort of reflux to the start of the film. So at the start of the film, Superman is defeated for the first time. We are introduced to Superman being defeated. And then the film ends with him sort of in his fortress of solitude, reflecting his human life. And this scene makes me tear up every time because I see myself, I think other people see themselves through the eyes of Superman in that scene, when you humanize Superman, you allow the audience to relate to him. And originally you could never relate to Superman, but now it's so easily to do, right? I think that last final scene with the sort of show reel of him as a kid with punk rocker cemented in my mind that this is awesome, dude. I love the ending. Superman being humanized only boosts the character phenomenally, I think. I think Superman is very much a human character at the end of the day. So guys, if I had to give this film a review out of 10 and just sort of summarize my thoughts on this film, in a few words, to describe this word using, let's say 3 words, I would use the words, human story for sure, 100% human, fun, just a fun atmosphere and good vibes throughout this film. I think this film really benefits from having comedic one-liners, but also it tackles, as we said in this episode, it tackles obviously some really realistic and human and sort of modern challenges that can be related to people today, right? So I think human, fun, and let's say exciting, because it sets up the DCU in such a nice way, and I can't wait to see these characters come to the big screen once more, right? Obviously we're getting Man of Tomorrow, which is the next installment for this character, and it's going to be featuring Lex Luthor again, and just that alone is getting me excited. We don't know much about Man of Tomorrow. Maybe we'll do an episode when we have a trailer or some more news to cover. I will definitely be doing more, hopefully, when the film or trailer drops for Man of Tomorrow. I'm still doing my podcast. That would be so cool just to So it's exciting because we're getting a new DCU, but it's also exciting because you're a nerd and you're going into a DCU with being a nerd and liking these characters, and you, in doing that, can then talk about it and create content. And that's what I love doing on this podcast. So the 3 words I would use to describe this film is human, fun, and exciting. I think that's pretty fair, isn't it, really? I think it's just a good vibe, this film. And it gets me excited, like I said. So it's now time to rank this film out of 10. So we have to cover all factors: the flaws, the pros, the cons, the soundtrack, the acting, the editing, comedy, seriousness, and the plot, the writing. You know, every aspect of this film that we've talked about in this episode has to be taken into account when you're reviewing it out of 10, right? One thing that I found really interesting before I get into my rating of this film, IMDb, which is a sort of film app or like a film website where people log films and it's like an official thing. I don't know how to describe it. It's like a rating thing, right? They gave Superman 2025 a 7 out of 10, and I think, in my opinion, that is way too harsh. I think alone this film is definitely more than a 7 because it tackles, like we said, bold topics. It's brave, it's bold, and it tackles some really brave and bold topics with some bold character choices. So I feel like it being bold obviously is very subjective. If you like this film, you may not like this film. I get that, but you got to commend it for being bold, right? The plot line, the writing is very much in your face, and I think the flow of the film is really good. So I think 7 out of 10 is a little bit too harsh for this type of film because it covers so much. It sets up a new DCU, it sets up a new Superman, it sets up its roster of characters, and it does it really well. I think 7 is really harsh. So I'm going to rate Superman 2025 a 9.8 out of 10. I think that's a pretty justified score. I think 9.8 out of 10 makes me, happy. I'm happy with that rating for this film. I think the acting was great. The music was great. The flow of the film was great. The color grading, the aesthetic was great. Comedy was top notch. Serious topics, like we said. And it's exciting, fun, and human. This film tackles a fictional Superman character, but grounds him to be super realistic and human, right? And I really appreciate that. And I feel like it's also very iconic. I feel like it's going to be a very iconic film, being the header for the DCU, being the start of the DCU, right? But yeah, that's my review, or that's my in-review of Superman 2025 on the Nerdiest podcast. I wanted to do this film because it was just so good, and it was been on my mind since it came out. So I went and gone to go see it on my birthday, the 11th of July, which it came out on that day in the cinemas. Such a memorable birthday. Having that film drop on your birthday is insane. And it blew me away, and I've rewatched it millions of times, and I felt like, I want to talk about it on my nerdy podcast. And I think, I hope you guys enjoyed it. I've talked about a lot of different things. Maybe I've took this film out of proportion. Maybe I've nerded out a little bit too hard. But hey, that's what this podcast is all about. Nerding out, and nerding out, right? You can't keep it bottled up, So yeah, Superman 2025 a 9.8 out of 10. We got some more episodes coming soon. We have our in-reviews, we have our comic retrospectives, and we have our comic character origin episodes, right? So those are 3 sort of series on the podcast that I hope to be doing more of. And yeah, I hope you guys are enjoying it as much as I am. I love making it. I love talking. As you can tell, I've been rambling on for ages, so I better wrap this episode up quickly. What do you think about Superman 2025? 9.8 out of 10. Do you think that's fair? Do you think that's too much, too little? Do you think it should have been a 10 out of 10? I think it could have been a 10 out of 10, but there are definitely some flaws I had. Obviously, we talked about that in this episode. So go and rewatch this episode, a billion times. Share with your friend who likes Superman. And remember to stay nerdy and stay true to yourself. And go and watch Superman 2025 and gather your own opinions on the film. See you in the next in review episode. Stay nerdy. And yeah, peace out.